Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, India and the United States agree to more sharing of intelligence and security data. But what does this mean for the Sikh community? Meanwhile, in the battle over young minds in the US, the educational establishment is facing demands to stop referring to Sikh terrorism in cultural history lessons. And talking of misinformation, the ongoing onslaught from India's right-wing extremists continues apace in spectacular hypocrisy, claiming how it's being used against their own agenda. And Los Angeles prepares for the big day on Sunday as the Khalistan Referendum rolls its glorious yellow flag procession into that Californian sunshine. All this and more on today's show, but joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our viewers out there. We hope that you're enjoying this week as we've been playing with different backgrounds and settings, and we're still working on a few bugs, but we're getting there. We're getting closer to the live shows, so we need you to let us know what time zones and such you're watching from so we can try to figure out the best time for us and for you.
Indeed, and James and I together today will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And of course, we'll be taking a look at loads of great comments at the end of the show, which have been filling up below the videos, so thank you as always for those. Right, James, let's get underway. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
Well, the U.S.-India strategic partnership is definitely deepening, and we are seeing that with the recent visit of Mrs. Gabbard in the India region, and she has been talking about many things, including trade, but most primarily what we have been following is the increase that they want to make in terms of military security and intelligence. Now, of course, intelligence and security issues have been going back some time between India and the United States, as well as the other Western world. And that has a lot to do with the growing risk and developments within China. Now, of course, India is going to be a strategic location in order to really secure that zone and to make sure that China understands that they are on notice. They are being watched in terms of the security. Now, of course, we know that they've been sharing information from some time, but they are definitely going to be increasing that. And a part of it, of course, will impact people in the U.S. and elsewhere as they start to share that information. We know that there are different areas of the world that share information. We know the Five Eyes, for example. And the question is, what exactly is the U.S. going to be sharing with India? Are they going to be sharing Five Eyes information? And if so, at what cost to the rest of the allies within that organization? We also have to be aware of what potential information they are sharing. We know that there are differences in how our data and information has been handled in the past as to how it's being handled under this current administration. So we want to be aware of what details on personal information are being released and individuals. That could be concerning, but at the same time, it is a good sign that there is that increase in security for everyone. Now, we also have to keep in mind that, they are really pushing it that they are sharing information with a free and democratic society in India. And that on this show, we've challenged that idea quite often in the fact that they are not so free and they are not so open. The concern being is that they may be taking in a lot more intel than they are releasing. And that, of course, is another concern. But add to that the misinformation that India has been releasing. We know that they've been very much involved in the disinformation campaigns, the foreign interference, as well as targeting individuals, whether it is Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who has recently resigned, or whether it be the information and security in relation to Gurpant Singh Panun. And again, we don't know what information is being shared. I think that we really have to keep an eye on that. But at the end of the day, it definitely moves in a more positive direction in terms of expanding that relationship. Now, of course, the other part of it is the IT and technical aspects of it. And again, that kind of intertwines with what we were just saying about the technology, about the online disinformation campaigns, and the clear outright lies that get spread through that online propaganda media from the RSS, from the BJP, and from the raw organization. So we have to watch that. At the end of the day, are they going to be a lot tighter with the other Five Eyes nations? That we'll have to wait and see, Angus, and watch how it unfolds. But it's really interesting that at this time, with there being still the investigation and the criminal proceedings in the attempted assassination of Mr. Panoon and the assassination here in Canada of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, that really raises concerns at this time about them sharing more intel when we know that we've had problems getting information out of them already.
Yes, indeed. I think this is not surprising, really, this news, bearing in mind the Trump administration has been making very positive overtures towards India. Let's start at the bigger picture of all this. Of course, it's unsurprising because the West has been courting India for several years, primarily to try and bring it into alliance with the West against this growing threat from China. The West really needs India because it obviously has that huge regional presence abutting China, so it really needs to bring India alongside. So it has been reaching out all these olive branches, whether it's militarily or military assistance and supplying arms and capabilities, whether it's technology, security, all these sorts of elements, and then of course the commercial side as well. So all these olive branches have been reached out towards India to try and seduce it away from certainly Russia, but particularly to bring it into alignment against this growing threat from China. So that's really what it's all about. Now the big question is, are the Five Eyes going to be mutually sharing intelligence of any real value with India? I think whatever gets passed to India will be going through a massive set of filters. It will be very, very carefully checked and vetted to ensure that anything being passed to India could not be used elsewhere. Because, of course, then the big question is, who else will India share it with? And that's what really matters. And, of course, we do know India has this very strong historic tie with Russia, with Moscow. Now, interestingly, Trump has, of course, been accused of being a real supporter of Putin, which I think is actually deeply wrong. He just understands Putin and he gets Putin. And there is this sort of talk of a potential new world order where there's actually a lot more of a closer alliance. Maybe alliance is too strong a word, but certainly closer relations between the US and Russia, which in my opinion is actually no bad thing. I've never seen Russia as such as a bogeyman as the West like to portray. I think, yes, there's no question about Putin. The guy is pretty dangerous, but he is, without doubt, he is a leader and he does everything in the interests of Russia. So I certainly can't take that away from Putin. But ultimately, Russia is actually better alongside. But at the moment, according to the official narrative in the West, Russia still remains an enemy. And so, of course, when the US shares intelligence, it's going to be thinking, India has these strong ties with Russia. Is this intelligence just going to be back-channeled through to Moscow? So, of course, anything that goes to Delhi is going to be is going to have no value whatsoever to Moscow. So that certainly is one filter that will be there. Now, the other question then, of course, is most of the intelligence that will be shared usually is about things like anti-terrorism. Of course, there's the big geopolitical arguments, but then at a more regional, local, smaller scale level is of course terrorism, and it's the global fight against terrorism. So it is very likely there will be a lot of information and intelligence shared with India about terrorism or anti-terrorism. Now, of course, if you have nothing to hide, you've nothing to fear. And I hate that phrase. It's one of the most dangerous phrases bandied about. But in this case, it actually is relevant, particularly to the Sikh community. Because it's likely the US will share some intelligence it sees fit to share with India to fight against a global war on terror. Now, most of that does actually come from the Islamic community. Unfortunately, I hate to label the Islamic community with anything, but of course, it's a fact of life that a lot of terrorism comes from the extremist end of the Islamic population of the world. And of course, the Five Eyes have been fighting that battle for many years. The rights or wrongs we can argue separately. But ultimately, that is probably the anti-terror intelligence that will be shared with India, and India likewise has its own battle with Islamic terrorism, notwithstanding the inter-community battles it has. But certainly there is an element of terrorism and extremism that spills over from Afghanistan, Pakistan. There's no denying that, and India does have a battle with that. I think that is what the focus will be on in terms of a lot of that intelligence at the smaller level. Now, when it comes to Sikh community, of course, the Sikh community are going to be saying, hang on, this worries us. Well, I would say to the Sikh community, it shouldn't worry you, because in reality, intelligence services don't have time to deal with creating fake information, creating trouble. They've got enough on their plate to deal with real, genuine threats against their relative interests. So India and the US, if there was a genuine issue about Sikh terrorism, if Khalistanis were running around the world planting bombs and being a genuine threat to society, yes, they would have something to fear. The Khalistan movement is now a peaceful, democratic movement. It has nothing to hide. It has nothing to fear. And therefore, I would say to the Sikh community, don't worry about this. This isn't going to affect you directly. There may be some nuances there. It's not going to be great, but ultimately, I think this is nothing to worry about for the Khalistan movement, because there's no way the US government does not see the Khalistan movement as a threat to any of its interests, because it knows it is a peaceful and democratic process. That's why Sikhs for Justice, for example, were at Trump's inauguration ball. They actually welcome any democratic movement. So I think the Sikh community has nothing to fear about this. And India, I have no doubt, will be trying to get intelligence about the likes of Panoon and the Khalistan campaigners in the US. They will be trying to suck information from US intelligence as part of this whole process. But why would US intelligence pass anything across? And even if they did, what value actually would it be? Because we know the Khalistan movement is no threat. It is no threat. The only threat it is to the Indian government through its democratic process, its fight for a sovereign nation. And frankly, there's not much intelligence that the US can share that India probably doesn't already know about. And ultimately, India has more to hide because of its transnational oppression against the Sikh community. The real terrorists, as we keep saying, is actually, ironically, the Indian state itself, who've been trying to assassinate Khalistan campaigners. So, James, my summary of all this is I think this is nothing to fear, nothing to worry about. It's actually a good thing from a geopolitical perspective. It's hopefully trying to seduce India away from Russia and that Russia-China alliance and back towards a democratic Western platform.
Absolutely, and I think that I'm hoping that behind closed doors they did talk about certain items, whether it be foreign interference, transnational repression, or just the domestic way in which the minorities are treated within the borders of India. Hopefully that came up, but again, it's not the focus of this meeting. And overall, I believe that it probably was successful. I know that Tulsi Gabbard had made a statement or a speech at one of the universities. She had met with business leaders, and I think that overall it was a positive meeting. I think that there was a lot accomplished to move the bilateral relations forward within India and the U.S. in that context. Now, speaking of moving things forward, the excitement is growing in Los Angeles, Angus. This weekend, coming up already, is the Los Angeles iteration of the Khalistan Referendum. And people are excited to get out and get their voices heard. And it looks like it's going to be a great turnout. Now, there was some concern with all of the fires and everything else that have been going on. Los Angeles has stretched pretty thin in terms of their stress level, we'll say. But I think that this is going to help to unite a city that's been through a hell of a lot over the last 6 months. I think that it's going to show unity. I think it's going to be an exciting event. And it's not going to be a Vaisakhi parade, but it's going to be just as exciting, I think. And the fact that it is an opportunity for people to get out and have their voices heard is one thing. But like I've said during the other referendums, is that I encourage non-Sikhs to go down and check it out. Talk to people, learn about what's going on, and interact. You know, there's always food and drinks and, tea and just different things going on where you can have a nice, relaxed afternoon, get to know your neighbors, and it brings community together. Now, this has been going on for those who are not super familiar with the Khalistan Referendum, and for those of non-Sikh background. The Khalistan movement emerged post-1947 partition, and it was seeking autonomy for the Sikhs and intensified during the 1980s. Unfortunately, things did get, we'll say, very violent. There was a genocide, there was the Operation Blue Star, and there was the potential of Operation Shanti, which was broken up and stopped before it happened, thank goodness, because many more innocent lives would have been lost. Now, over that period of time, or since the 80s, of course, the call for Khalistan has been growing. And especially in the mid-90s, it really made a resurgence. And that has a lot to do with Sikhs for Justice really keeping the drive alive for Khalistan. And they have been doing this through public advocacy, through public awareness and education, reaching out internationally with the referendum votes. And they may be non-binding votes, but they can have a huge benefit to showing India that the people want this, that it is an essential part of restoring what was taken from the Sikhs back in when the colonization of Britain or of India by Britain happened. And it's really interesting now to see that with the weekend coming up and all of the excitement going on around the referendum, that it was just a few days ago that Narendra Modi turned around and requested of the U.S. to consider or to label Sikhs for Justice as a terrorist organization. Now, my concern is that this was, in terms of Modi's perspective, well-timed to try and create some division, to create some fear, and to create some anger towards the Sikh community leading up to this referendum vote in Los Angeles. So I'm hopeful that that doesn't work, because I think Los Angeles residents are smarter than Modi gives them credit for. They know that the Sikhs for Justice is not a terrorist organization. They know that Sikhs are very heavily involved in committing themselves to the community. They know that during the recent wildfires, between United Sikhs and all these other Sikh organizations, they were there. They were on the front lines feeding people, clothing people, helping people to evacuate. And they know that the rhetoric coming out of India when it comes to Sikhs for Justice and Mr. Panoon is just a pile of crap. But with that said, of course, it's India trying to basically spread their divide across the world. But I don't think it's going to happen here. I think that it's going to be an amazing turnout this weekend. I think people are excited, and it's going to be, as I said, if you're not a Sikh individual, get down there and check it out anyway. Talk to people, learn, ask questions, just be a part of the whole atmosphere. It's beautiful. Now, looking back quickly here, we can see that the turnouts at the various referendum votes around the world that have been held so far in Brampton in Ontario, they estimate 110,000 people showed up for that one on September the 19th in 2022. In Surrey, British Columbia, they don't have an exact figure for or a number listed on the Wikipedia site, but I know that it was about 250 to 300,000 people in September of 2023, because I was there at that event covering it. And they actually had to add a second day because they didn't have enough time to get everybody through the voting booths. So that was a beautiful thing that so many turned out in great numbers. And to show you how many, on October the 29th, 2023, they had a second event in Surrey where over 200,000 people showed up to vote. So that was, they're saying that's combined. I apologize. But then in Calgary, 53,000. Again, we covered that on this show. And then Melbourne, Australia, 31,000. Auckland, New Zealand, 37,000. San Francisco, 127,000. And in Sacramento, 61,000. So it shows that this is not a fringe movement. This is something exciting, something building. And Angus, one day you and I are going to be sitting at a cafe in Khalistan enjoying lunch in between doing the show.
I look forward to that very day. And these events are always I think the word is excitement, because these events do generate so much positive enthusiasm and excitement as they approach. I mean, the car rallies, you just need to see the length of these car rallies and truck rallies that always seem to precede these events that Sikhs for Justice always like to organise. They're so visual, and such a huge message that it sends out, because they are amazing to see. They're fabulous. With this long line, this huge sort of line of Khalistan flags in these rallies is quite a sight to behold. And as I keep saying, every time these things happen, in terms of getting the message out, not just to the Sikh community, but to the wider audience, to the area, it sends out a hugely powerful message, because people then ask the question, what is this Khalistan? What is this campaign all about? And of course, then it gives that great opportunity for the community to explain what it's all about. And then, of course, if it sounds reasonable, if it sounds justified, people then get on side with it. They align with it. They support it. And that's the key thing, is that a larger proportion of people starts supporting the idea. And of course, the more widespread that becomes, the more mainstream it becomes, the more the easier it is for the Khalistan, the whole concept of Khalistan, to fall naturally into place, as indeed it will. So and it's great to see this. And in fact, this week, the Friday podcast will not be on Friday this week. I will actually be talking directly to Dr. Bakshi Singh Sandhu, one of the founders of Sikhs for Justice, on Sunday, actually in LA. I won't be in LA, unfortunately, myself, but he will be there on the ground, and I'll be talking to him from here in the UK. Just ask him how it's going. He'll show us some pictures, hopefully, and we can ask Dr. Sandhu a few questions about how it's going on Sunday, and I'll report that obviously next week in one of next week's shows. So do keep an eye out for that. But good luck to everybody on Sunday. It's a fantastic event. If you are in LA or in that area, get down there on Sunday. Show your support. Get your vote in. It's a great opportunity. It's a hugely positive democratic move. It is an outpouring of democracy. It's an explosion of democracy. It's a wonderful thing to see. And the irony is that Narendra Modi tries to label the Khalistan movement as a bunch of terrorists, and the fact that that Sikhs for Justice are holding a referendum, one of the key fundamental mechanisms of a democracy. That is why he wants Trump to label SFJ as a bunch of terrorists, because they're holding a referendum. The irony just sits hilariously, James.
It does, Angus. And as you can see in the photo here, it's not just about going down and placing your vote and leaving. People go down, they spend part of the day there. They get their vote cast, and then they sit around, they socialize, they visit with the community, they eat. There's lots of food there that they were handing out to the homeless people and people in need in the area, but just people who happen to be going by as well, inviting them to have some food, to have something to drink because it was a hot day, giving out bottles of water. The humanity of it is just so welcoming that it's really cool. So again, if you're in Los Angeles this weekend on Sunday, it is happening at the Civic Plaza. The voting will open at 9 a.m. We'll wrap up at about 5 p.m. So if you're in the area, make sure you get down and have your vote heard. If, again, you're non-Sikh, then just go down and experience it and really get to know the community. It's a wonderful event, and I wish everybody a wonderful day down there. Send us some photos, send us your videos, and send us your comments, as always.
Yes, definitely do that. If you are down there this weekend in LA, send us some photos. We'll give you a shout out. We'll show you on the show. Send photos, videos, whatever. Just send us a photo to message@satlodgetv.com. Get it into us, and we'll be more than happy to show it up on the show next week. So, right, James, let's move on. And one of the words that we talk a lot about is this word education. And education is a bit of a battleground, sadly, for the young. And it's the battle for the hearts of the young, and certainly the minds of the young. And this is something that the Sikh community has fought long and hard about. And in the United States, the Sikh Coalition has had to launch a new campaign because, unfortunately, it does appear that the schools, the educational curriculum in many of the schools, certainly in 10 states in the US, does include reference on a too regular basis to what they call Sikh terrorism, Sikh terror. So, as a result, the Sikh Coalition are urging the community, it's a call for action. They're saying that we need to take urgent action against what's called the American birthright model. And it's part of this social studies standard, it's part of this curriculum. And what they're claiming is it is harming the nation's students, and it's certainly dangerous for the Sikh community. Now, the standards only apparently mention Sikhi twice, most prominently calling for students to learn about what it calls Sikh terror, as they describe the history of independent India, Pakistan, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka in their 10th grade history classes. Now, of course, it's unsurprising this matters because, of course, children, what they learn at school sets their mindset for the rest of their lives. It's what they form their own opinions, and it influences them so significantly as they grow up. So it's important then to educate children about the genuine rights and wrongs. And for more than 20 years, of course, the Sikh community has had this fight ongoing, and certainly since 9/11, because 9/11, of course, unfortunately, really brought a wave of hatred and discrimination against the community. It was misplaced because, of course, people just, many just who were, I would say, ill-educated, didn't understand that anybody wearing a turban actually wasn't a Muslim or an Islamic terrorist. They're a Sikh, but of course they can't distinguish that. So unfortunately, the Sikh community, as they walked, or certainly the men, particularly as they walked around with turbans, were discriminated against post 9/11 by people who obviously understandably wanted revenge against that dreadful attack. So there has been this ongoing battle to try and educate people about what the Sikh community is, what it stands for, etc. And so this forms one of these big problems. This is why particularly the Sikh Coalition are particularly sensitive to things like this, and they're having to create this new action to try and prevent this. Now, Sikh children particularly, of course, do face rather a disproportionate rate of bullying because of their wearing their turbans, their kesh and their other articles of faith. And even the community as a wider group is facing this narrative, battling this narrative that is coming out of India, which includes India's allies and media outlets, which of course are so powerful. And the main narrative is that the Sikh community is dangerous and radical and a bunch of terrorists, which of course is this dreadful misinformation. Now, this so-called American birthright standard is written and promoted by an advocacy group called the Civics Alliance, and they attempt to implement their standards state by state across the US, and in many cases attempting to replace or ignore existing processes or protocols by which the state's own educators and the policymakers, even the parents, determine what is right for their children to learn in public schools. So they're pushing their own agenda to replace the existing agenda that the actual stakeholders think is the right thing for their children. Now, the Civics Alliance is trying to work with as many state legislators as it can. Certainly, it is across more than 10 states to achieve their goal. Now, the Sikh Coalition are saying, look, we've got to stop this. And they're saying that we need to take action about this. So what they're saying is we need to get members of the Sikh community and outside, if they're willing, to send a pre-written message to every policymaker listed on the Civic Alliance's website to tell them why centering Sikh terror is unacceptable and urge them to end their relationship with the Civics Alliance. And when everybody's done that, please share the URL that they show up with your friends and family across the country, urging them to take action too. So in other words, spread the message around, get more people to do it. And it's also organising an open letter from Sikh organisations and Gurdwaras and Sikh scholars to denounce the American birthright standards characterisation of Sikhs. So it's saying, please, if you represent a Gurdwara committee, email the Sikh Coalition organisation itself and let them know that you want to support this, and they will put you in touch with the right people and they will set you in the right direction to start to take action against this. American birthright standards are really dangerous, and there's a lot of people who've been criticising this American birthright standard because it is harmful to many other communities. It's not just the Sikh community that it's damaging, it's also damaging other communities who are also standing up in equivalence about this, and they're saying, look, we've got to stand up against this and we've got to stop it. They have also been denounced by groups like the National Council for Social Studies and the American Historical Association, who also said, look, these guys are spreading an agenda that is wrong, it is divisive, it is not good for our young minds. So, James, unfortunately, this is, as I said at the beginning, this is a battle for the minds of the young generation. It's a deeply insidious battle. We see it in many arenas. But of course, the RSS have been battling this very hard with all their advocates across the US and across the West. But it's found its way, it's infiltrated its way into many other groups, including this group. So it is very important the Sikh community stand up against this. It's all about misinformation, ultimately. And it's all about educating the young minds, not the Sikh community, but those outside the Sikh community, about what the Sikh community stands for. It is a peaceful society. It is a very beneficial society. And as we keep saying, it stands up for all that is right and good about humanity. That is what should be the young mind should be educated about. And that is why things like this are so important, James.
Sorry about that. We've got a storm going by. The trees were a little noisy there, so I muted myself and forgot to unmute myself. But it's an issue that we've talked about previously, Angus, and that is about the education system. And we know that there are fights on both sides in terms of what's being taught in our schools, what's being taught to the young minds, and what is actually accurate information and what's being misportrayed within the history books. I remember back in grade 8 here in Canada, we studied from a history book for social studies, and we did study the Sikh Empire, we did study the British Empire and all these different things, but we also happened to be living, this would have been shortly after 1984 through 1986 region, when there was really a lot going on within that community. So I don't know if the history books have been rewritten to include that and to really sort out the misinformation that might have been there at that time. And I think it's important that all communities come together, that they are able to teach accurate history. But again, history can be subjective as well. It's about who can produce documents, who has the loudest voice, and of course, as the old saying goes, the loudest or the squeakiest wheel gets the grease, Angus.
Absolutely. So please do get yourselves along to the Sikh Coalition's website, have a look at that document, those documents they're posting up, and do please take action if you are in the United States to try and prevent this quite insidious act to turn people against the Sikh community. Now, misinformation, of course, is this hot word, this dreadful word that we have to deal with on such a regular basis. And in India, there's been a lot going on, of course. If you trawl through anything to do with the right-wing media in India, and that includes most of Indian media, sadly, the extremists on the right wing are really leveraging any action they can against the Islamic population. Particularly, if you look through any social media accounts of the right wing, in India, it is absolutely chock full of anti-Islamic propaganda and misinformation and some really quite nasty stuff and quite dangerous stuff. And unfortunately, the Islamic population in India have, of course, like the Sikh community, have been targeted quite dreadfully. But ultimately, they have, unsurprisingly, fought back in many ways. And recently in Maharashtra, there's been some dreadful riots going on. I don't want to talk too much about the riots, because this primarily today, I just want to focus on the misinformation story. But ultimately, there have been some pretty nasty riots going on. And it actually happened in Nagpur. And on Tuesday this week, a couple of days ago, this Nagpur violence has been labelled as a planned incident. And Maharashtra Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis has said, look, this was planned, and anybody who attacks police will not be spared, because he's claiming that the local Muslim population have been rising up and attacking the police. Specific houses, establishments have been targeted by mobs, and it does look like a conspiracy, according to the Chief Minister. Now, the immediate cause of these riots was actually unfounded rumours that the Quran had been burned during a protest by a right-wing group demanding the removal of Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb's tomb, which is in Sambhaji Nagar. The protest was organised by some right-wing groups such as the Vishwa Hindu, Parishad, the VHP, and Bajrang Dal, who allegedly burned a cloth with kalma on it, leading to widespread outrage amongst Muslim groups. Now, as I said, this is just yet more manifestation of this divisive action that's happening in India, this dreadful breaking apart of the communities. Now, I'm going to lay a small proportion of the blame on the Islamic community on this, and it is understandable, it is justifiable to some degree. They are fighting back, they are fighting against this growing anti-Islam movement, this right-wing extremism that is growing in India. But unfortunately, with this overreaction, if a page of the Quran is burnt, they then take to the streets and start screaming bloody murder. This has happened in the West. We've had certain incidents very similar to this. Now, the trouble with this, though, is, and I'm not anti-Islam in any way, shape or form, but by doing this, they are creating an excuse for right-wing extremists to then take to the streets themselves and start attacking the innocent Islamic community. So all this is doing is just generating problems, it's generating mob violence, it's generating division and problems. So that is a big problem that is growing in India, and this unfortunately is increasingly happening under the BJP government, and we report it on far too regular a basis. So there is this growing violence between the right-wing Hindu community and the Islamic community. So why is this relevant to this whole story about misinformation? Well, when I was trawling through this actual story and through the right-wing media and the right-wing social media, particularly the extremist right-wing social media in India, I came across quite an interesting video that's doing the rounds. It's gone viral, this video, that's being spread by the right-wing extremists. Have a look at this video. I did chuckle when I watched it.
दोस्तों, नॉर्थ ईस्ट में कुछ लोगों को लगता है कि आरएसएस एक खतरा है कि हिंदुइज्म एक खतरा है। मैं आपको बताना चाहता हूँ, ये लोग बेवकूफ लोग हैं, क्या क्या प्रोपेगेंडा देखते रहते हैं। इंडिया सेक्युलर क्यों है? द मेकर्स ऑफ कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन कुड हैव डिसाइडेड दैट इंडिया वाज ए हिंदू राष्ट्र, ए हिंदू नेशन, द ओनली नेशन इन द वर्ल्ड। उन्होंने सेक्युलर शब्द क्यों दिया? क्यों ज्यूइश परसिक्यूशन कभी इंडिया में नहीं हुआ? यहूदियों पे कभी हमला इंडिया में क्यों नहीं हुआ? पूरी दुनिया में हुआ, भारत में क्यों नहीं हुआ? क्योंकि उन्हें पता था कि इंडिया आजादी से पहले भी एक सेक्युलर देश था। ये हिंदुओं की वजह से हुआ है। आप यहाँ आके अपना धर्म आराम से मान सकते हैं। दोस्तों, कुछ लोग हिंदुइज्म को वीडियोस से देख लेते हैं, प्रोपेगेंडा वीडियोस से, कि हिंदू ऐसे हैं वैसे हैं। वीडियोस देख के इनका परसेप्शन बनाए कि हिंदू ऐसा है। लेकिन मैं आपको बताना चाहता हूं कि असल में हिंदुइज्म इज डीपर देन यू थिंक। रीड द स्क्रिप्चर्स मैन। वुड यू रेदर विश 70% ऑफ इंडिया वाज हिंदू और 70% ऑफ इंडिया वाज समथिंग एल्स? देयर इज माय क्वेश्चन। इफ 70% ऑफ इंडिया वाज समथिंग एल्स, would India still be a secular country? That is my question.
Right, the irony and hypocrisy drips large out of that video, and of course there's an awful lot we could pick apart in that video, which unfortunately we don't have time to talk about. But ultimately, it's interesting, ironic, isn't it, that you could replace the word Hindu with Sikh in most of that video, and and how much misinformation and propaganda is used against the Sikh community to persuade the Hindu community to turn against it. You see, it's how ironic it is. And when he talks about India being secular. Well, technically, according to the Constitution, India is secular. Then why then did the BJP government and Narendra Modi fight the last general election based on a pro-Hindu ticket? Because he knew that 80% of the population of India is actually Hindu. I think it's 83% to be correct. He fought his election based on we are Hindus. That he based it on religious grounds. So why is India then secular? India isn't secular. Technically, it's supposed to be. Then why is the government fighting all its policies on a Hindu, pro-Hindu agenda? You know, it sticks totally wrongly. And then the final bit about if India was 70% something else, would it still be secular? In other words, that in itself was that inherent anti-Islamic message, because of course he's referring to Islam there. So you can see again this right wing obsession against Islam, and this is why videos like this are so dangerous, because they just drip anti-Islam, they drip this divisive message. But again, James, as I say, it's deep hypocrisy. And just to finish this off, and just to rub this in about the hypocrisy of the right wing. claiming all this anti-right-wing, anti-RSS propaganda, misinformation. Well, we talk on a regular basis, on a daily basis, about right-wing RSS misinformation and propaganda, anti-Sikh and pro-Modi propaganda. Well, Baz News then reported on this same day that CSIS, the Canadian Secret Intelligence Service, is actually looking into disinformation networks, including from India, spreading false narratives about Jagmeet Singh and his ability to enter America as an election call looms. Some posts have garnered million-plus views and thousands of engagements. And for example, this one, in fact, this comes from that same account we talked about yesterday, saying where Kash Patel allegedly had warned Jagmeet Singh that if he enters the USA, he will be extradited to India over his ties to Khalistan, which of course is absolute nonsense. But this is the usual misinformation spread, the anti-Khalistan, anti-Sikh message spread by the RSS and the Hindutva online army, James. So this misinformation war is just really stepping up a pace. As I keep saying, I think this, although it is bad in essence, in reality what it's showing, it's indicating is the Khalistan movement is becoming so powerful, so successful, that the momentum is moving so heavily towards it and in favour of it, is that India is fighting an increasingly desperate battle online and across the media to try and take back the narrative, to try and win back control the narrative, because it knows it is losing this battle against the Khalistan movement, James.
Absolutely, Angus. And as I said earlier, I don't believe that it is coincidence that a lot of the stuff is coming out right before the referendum vote in Los Angeles this weekend. I believe that it is a strategy. I think it's a game being played by Narendra Modi, by RA, by RSS. I think that they are really ramping up just to create that division and that anger in the community. And it's not working. It's not going to work. People are smarter than that. People are starting to realize how the online streams such as this one are just there to manipulate and to try to, give that misinformation and misrepresent it as real news. So again, it reminds me of when we were kids at the grocery aisle, and they always had, those magazines at the checkout there, the National Enquirer with the three-headed baby. And, it's all about that false information that some people are silly enough to believe as truth.
Indeed, it's quite terrifying, certainly as we reported yesterday, how effective this misinformation can be. Even just ordinary people believe it as true, and it's quite scary. So we will continue our battle to highlight it wherever we find it, James. Right, on that note, let's move on to our comments column. Loads of great comments in. Thank you to our audience, as always, for your wonderful contributions. Pritam Korman starts us off today with wishing us a Happy New Year, as many of our commenters did. Thank you and a Happy New Year. Happy New Year. The Chet month, as you rightly say, is the start of bloom season. Yes, it is that wonderful start of spring. Finally, James, I'm happy to say spring is finally here.
I'm going to start blooming out of my... I don't think I can bloom anymore and still fit in my clothes, so maybe I better not.
And swiftly moving on. Free spirits. Yes, we talked about Sant Bhindranwale, and one of our commenters claimed that Sant Bhindranwale was a double agent. But as Free Spirit says, look, no, this is typical modus operandi of agents of RAW, IB, NIA, the intelligence agents of India. They're using paid stooges online, podcasters, vloggers, etc., as well as the entire Godi media to spread this misinformation, to do their dirty work. And we talk often, James, about Gaurav Araya, Major Araya, that ex-army officer on YouTube, who spread so much hatred and nastiness on YouTube. But I didn't know this, and thank you, Free Spirit, for letting us know this, is that he's widely known, affectionately known, as he rightly says, as Gobar Araya, which means cow dung Araya. No, we're not leaving that out. That was definitely worth putting in. But that's how he's known across the diaspora. So thank you for letting us know that about Gobar Araya. And then you highlight lots of other accounts, Palki Sharma, Samita Prakash, Arnav Goswami, etc., etc. Ad infinitum. Indeed, James. I mean, how many Godi media and how many RSS Hindutva accounts have we come across? Too many, I would say.
Absolutely, and they're still going. Angus, even that one that we were looking at last night there, the Canada something or other, And yeah, I mean, there's just so many of them that we just shake our head and we can't even keep up with them. So it's really tough for the general public to keep up with what's, what's a fake news outlet and what's real. And yeah, we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, and the next comment, Lovely Diving Board says, and apologies, for some reason I've cut the bottom half of your comments off on here, but you do highlight something very, very significant. We have talked about this in the past. RAW working with Russia to target political dissidents in the UK, Canada, USA and Pakistan. And they have, of course, assassinated many high-profile Sikh leaders, and including one in Pakistan, as you rightly say. This is a worry in that we do know that RAW have colluded closely with Russia, and even recently we do know there is evidence that the FSB have worked with RAW, particularly to target Russian dissidents across the West. But we do know that RAW are leaning on the FSB to also provide intelligence to help RAW target Khalistan campaigners, James. So this is a dangerous collusion. When we talk about Russia, Moscow, Delhi ties, this is certainly one tie that is very, very dangerous for the West, and particularly the Khalistan movement.
Absolutely. And I mean, when you're looking at the ties between India and Russia, then you also have to look into, the North Korea, the Iran, all of these different intertwining or these inner workings. And yeah, it definitely puts out a dangerous situation, Angus.
Yeah, and the FSB, formerly the KGB, we do know they have an extremely powerful, extremely effective, and of course very mature, very well experienced operational infrastructure across the whole world. Of course, being the intelligence service of Russia. And if Delhi, particularly the RSS, get their hands on that ability, it really, really is dangerous. So something to watch out for. We had an email from one of our regular correspondents. Thank you to that correspondent for your comments. And you raised three very important points here. Yesterday on the 18th, there was a discussion about this protest, about the protest outside the Mandir. We had this discussion, James, whether it was morally right to protest outside a Mandir, a place of sanctuary. It is a place of worship. Is it morally right to do that? Yes, we all have a democratic right to protest, but is it right in that moral sense to do this outside a place of worship? But as you rightly say, as our correspondent says, look, the reason that it was outside the Mandirs is because it is known that these Mandirs are harbouring agents of the RSS, and likewise outside embassy premises, and the embassies were actually operating outside, inside the Mandirs as well. So these Mandirs are no longer being used as purely as places of worship. They are now extending their facilities to be used for embassy business, and as we know, those embassies also allow agents of the RSS to undertake their nasty business, their dirty business, particularly the anti-Khalistan and anti-Sikh business, and therefore channeling it through the Mandirs. So that is why, James, that these protests actually are justified, why actually they were there outside the Mandirs, which to me does sound correct actually and justifiable.
Yeah, absolutely, Angus. And we've seen in recent, over the last year even, where the Canadian government, where the courts have issued injunctions to prevent any type of protest from happening in close proximity to certain gurdwaras because of the fact that government was doing some outreach work there. But there were protests going on, and they really were concerned about the violence, about anything cracking out from those protests. So it's very rare that you see that in the Western world. But at the same time, it's also appropriate, because if you've got 1,000 protesters sitting at the beach with their signs, I mean, it's not going to really get much of a message across as it will outside of a consulate or outside of the Mandir or, so forth. So again, it's one of those debatable issues. And I think that overall, I don't see a problem with protesting as long as you are off of the main property. And second of all, as long as you're not interfering with or intimidating people going to that place of worship or other place.
Yeah, and his second point that the commenter raises is about this attack in Amritsar that we reported on yesterday. And you claim that the media's portrayal of him as being a Muslim, and the news spreading around the sort of the mainstream and social media, is that this guy who took his life into his own hands and waded into the Ahmadiyya Sahib with an iron rod, expecting to walk out alive as he attacked Sikhs. In fact, he was escorted out with his face covered in blood. It's reported that he was a Muslim, but in fact, you believe, Mr. Commenter, that he was an agent of RAW. This wouldn't be a surprise. I mean, it certainly wouldn't be the first time that somebody has been used as a proxy by RAW and RSS to spread their dangerous agenda and spread violence as an agent provocateur. And then, James, really this is your department, your report about Mr. Chadha in Canada. This commenter believes that this individual might be gathering people for sheep for slaughter. And it does raise concerns since he's never previously stood up for Sikhs. He's never actually in the past. He's no track record standing up for the Sikh community. So why is he doing it now? He's now positioning himself as a leader, an influencer. It seems more like a repeat of the RSS-linked figures such as Ruby Della. Well, is this guy just an opportunist, James, or do we think he's genuine?
Well, I definitely don't see the genuine part of it in him, but we can always give him the benefit of the doubt. But I personally, I doubt to give him any benefit. At the end of the day, it is what it is, Angus, and you can put lipstick on a pig, but at the end of the day, that bacon still tastes good.
Absolutely, and I think all we can do about Mr. Chadha is we'll judge by results. We'll see if he is an opportunist, if he delivers the goods, that's what matters. If he doesn't, then we will be the first to criticise. TC comes up with an interesting comment. We talked a lot about beards and this dreadful story about the US military re-examining the situation of beards in the US military. TC says, look, beards for Sikhs are part of our identity. It's not for negotiation. Absolutely. As you rightly say, there's nothing further left to say on the matter. And Sikh military prowess does indeed speak for itself. Now, we talked about this discussion about who should be on the front line. We should play people at their strengths. In other words, it should be based on merit. If you have the physical strength to be there, which obviously is greater in a man, more muscle strength and physicality as compared to women, if physical strength is the main factor, that determines the outcome at the front line. Absolutely it does. I think to me it's unambiguous. Careful examination of what's required is needed and the composition of the opponent's side. In other words, if you're coming up against a 6'6" bear of a man, then you need to be able to physically take that man on equal terms or better. It's no different to selecting people to do various jobs or in sports, as you rightly say. You're not going to choose a man who's 3'4" to play basketball for your team. I mean, as you rightly say, it's totally right. We need to factor the type of warfare, as in Sikh history, there are also great Sikh lionesses that were formidable, absolutely right, and we must always salute those heroic Sikh women who have fought on equal terms, basically, throughout history, James. So, James, really what this all boils down to is if you're good enough to fight the fight, then you deserve your place on the front line, is really what it's all about.
Absolutely, and let's face it, there are many areas that women probably are, have an advantage over us. But I also think it's important to keep in mind that as other militaries deploy women on the front lines or otherwise, I think that there is a place to make sure that there's a certain humanity there that sometimes gets lost in the adrenaline that the men have when they are going into a community where, they are not there to make friends. They are not there to appease somebody's nerves. They are there for one goal and one mission. I think that in accomplishing that mission or even getting intel out of women, I think that there's a place there as well for women to be able to communicate with other women of the opposing side, we'll say, and be able to get that intel out of them a lot easier than a man would, I think.
Absolutely.
So there are places definitely where I think there's advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah, totally agree. And certainly, I referred to fighter pilots. Females make fantastic fighter pilots because they have the right skills and they deserve their places there. But as you rightly referred to the intelligence corps, for example, the intelligence regiments, there are definitely great places for women there because, for example, the male regiments are the blunt instrument. And quite often it requires something a little less blunt than that, something with a little bit more finesse. And this is quite often why infantry units have intelligence liaison officers working with them, who can indeed be women, because they can bring that female perspective that is quite often needed in a certain situation where, for example, that unit needs to win the hearts and minds of a local community that they're infiltrating or whatever. So there is definitely a place, in the right place, for women in the armed forces. So that's really what it's all about. As TC rightly says, the right person for the right job. That's really what it's all about.
Exactly.
Balbiacore says, well said, Angus, that's what Sikh beards got to do with anything. Indeed, they fought in world wars and 21 Sikhs won the Battle of Sarigari against thousands. Yes, this is absolutely bang on. James, let me enlighten our audience and indeed ourselves about this wonderful Battle of Sarigari. Let me just give you a quick summary of what this is about. Again, fabulous historical piece of military heritage for the Sikh community. The Battle of Sarigari, it was a last stand battle fought before the Tirah campaign between the British Indian Empire and Afghan tribesmen. In 1897, an estimated up to 24,000 tribesmen were seen near Gogra and around Sarigari, cutting off Fort Khalistan from Fort Lockhart, so they were cut off. The Afghans attacked the outposts of Sarigari, where thousands of them swarmed and surrounded the fort, preparing to assault it. Inside the fort, led by Havildar Ishar Singh, the 21 Sikh soldiers in this fort against up to 24,000 tribesmen, get that in your head, they refused to surrender. They were wiped out in a last stand. They stood to the last man. The post was eventually recaptured 2 days later by the British. All of the 21 soldiers involved in the battle were posthumously awarded the Indian Order of Merit, which was the highest gallantry award that an Indian soldier could receive at the time. The Indian Army's 4th Battalion of the Sikh Regiment commemorates the battle every year on the 12th of September as Sarigari Day. Wow, James, how about that? In terms of military prowess of the Sikh community, I mean, it just brings goosebumps up. Well done to those 21 heroic Sikhs forming a final last stand. I mean, it does bring goosebumps up. And celebrated every year in September, Sarigari Day. Thank you, Balbir Kaur, for bringing that to our attention, James.
Yeah, great story and great information. As I say, it's a learning journey here for us, Angus. We learn all of these new things that are inspirational, that show us the value and the importance that the Sikh community has brought throughout history, right up to this modern day. So again, well done. I mean, we can't say more than that, Angus.
Indeed, I do love hearing about these fabulously heroic military stories from the Sikh days of glory in the past. So do let us know more about these. We do love to hear about them. I do love to research them. It's always great to read about them. Human says, how pathetic it feels when these Modi supporters spread hate against Sikhs and undermine their right to self-determination. When Sikh gurus sacrifice their lives for their religion, their religious freedom. And it does, James. We talked a lot about misinformation. It does feel pathetic, these Modi supporters spreading hatred. Don't spread hatred, James. This is what we're here for, is to highlight the fact that this hatred is being spread. What we want is to spread peace and love. I hate to be all 1960s hippie about this, but ultimately that is what Sikhi is all about. It is trying to create just the goodness of humanity, saying, look, why can't we all just live together in a little bit more peace? This is what Khalistan is about. This is trying to establish a whole oasis of peace and equality in that whole region. So why can't people just be a little bit more understanding and live in a little bit more of democratic peace, James?
Absolutely, Angus. And I remember, growing up, my mother always telling us, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And to this day, I believe in that. And, you can go back to the old saying that, some of the most powerful words in history are the ones that went unspoken. So, I think there's a lot of power in that phrase.
Absolutely right. And talking of powerful words, I will leave our final word of the show to Suftu Muffins, who says, I'm so surprised that Satluj TV is still not supported by Sikhs abroad. Please share and support. Yes, Suftu Muffins, that is absolutely right. Please do. To our lovely audience who've been so wonderfully loyal and contributed so much to the show, thank you for that. But please do spread the word. I'm delighted to say, James, we are up to 25,000 subscribers. How fantastic that is. It does make us feel nice and warm inside that there is a growing audience out there who do appreciate our ramblings, our daily rantings and ramblings.
Absolutely. 25,200 is the last I checked, so we are growing still at a steady pace, not a quick pace, but a steady pace. But you can be a part of our growth by helping to spread the word, and we appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.
We certainly do, which does bring us conveniently to a close to the show for another day. But thank you so much for watching. Please do keep those comments coming in. We do love reading them, and as I say, there's so many fantastic references to wonderful things that we do love to research and talk about and bring back to you on the show. So do keep those references coming in. Don't forget, you can message us directly at message@satlojtv.com if there's anything you'd like to bring to our attention directly. But that is it for another day and indeed another week. As I say, I'll hopefully be talking to Dr. Sandhu on Sunday at that referendum. Good luck to everybody on Sunday in LA, and we'll report on that next week. But that is it for another day, another week. Thanks so much for keeping with us. Thanks for your loyalty. Do keep those comments coming in. But in the meantime, it is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
And remember, it's 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the Civic Center in downtown Los Angeles. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe.
Indeed. You have been watching Perspectives. We will see you next week.